All right, Shalom, Wa Barakim La Allah Yanawa Yahuwah, by Hashem Yahushai, by Hashem Rakak Wadash, double honor, as always, them Yah to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone who rule well and have labored faithfully in his truth. Peace, love, blessings, and salutations to the hopeful elect, Habayath, Madawadah, the house of David. The brothers laboring day in and day out to make their calling of election sure, helping seal the elect of the nation of Israel for the return of our Lord, Hamashiach Yahushai, is at hand. And to the Akim and Akwafim, which are the brothers and sisters who also listen and believe on Yahweh Shem Yahushai, to you I say Shalom. So Shalom to the hopeful elect, as a brother Sakallah, coming back with another lesson through the Spirit, Lord willing. This lesson is edifying for those that have eyes to see and ears to hear, which is through the Rakak Wadash, which is the Holy Spirit. So I'm going to jump right into it, wasting no time. I was inspired by this video you see on the screen here, which was a response video of sorts, which initially, I believe, was done by the elder brother of the GMS Atlanta camp, Atazawam, and it was a response, by the elder brother of the GMS Charlotte camp, which is ICR. And I was inspired by seeing this video and, hearing the commentary on it through the Spirit to just go into the lesson I'm doing that you see here on the screen, which is called Reincarnated. Reincarnated. So it's just going into King David, which when you go into King David, King David's name was Dawadah, which is the beloved. He was the beloved of the Lord, the beloved of the Most High. So without further ado, I'm just going to, jump right into it and go into the fact that, King David, throughout his different lives, King David, he was reincarnated, just like Yahuwah Shai and other disciples, and just like we are, So King David was reincarnated, right? Meaning he came back in the flesh. So let's get that definition of reincarnated. When you look up the word reincarnated, I have it here, in the etymology, the online etymology, the word regeneration I'll look up first, and then reincarnation, which in essence mean the same thing. So to be reincarnated or to be regenerated. Regeneration, it says the act of regenerating or producing anew. When something is produced, again, is anew, refreshed. It says originally spiritual, also of the resurrection. So King David, the brothers were speaking about King David being resurrected, right? So King David, is going to be resurrected, but he was reincarnated many times when he lived, here on the earth. When you go into the scriptures, the same as Yahuwah Shai, right? Yahuwah Shai being Adam, Melchizedek, going forward, Isaac, so on and so forth. So just like Yahuwah Shai, King David was reincarnated and came back many different times. That's why I titled this video Reincarnated, just to land back off the brother, just in a different way, just going into the fact that regeneration and reincarnation is biblical. Now I'm going to go into that word reincarnated. When you go into the word reincarnated or reincarnate, it says reincarnate or reincarnate means anew, from which means back, and is means back again. Incarnate means in the flesh, to come back again in the flesh. To be regenerated means to come back again, in your genes, which is, in your times, through your genealogy, through your family. So to be regenerated and to be reincarnated means, in essence, the same thing. It means to come back in the flesh, right? So let's jump into it. The fact that this is going into being King David being resurrected, because the first definition we saw or we heard, that is, for the word regeneration, it said the act of regenerating or producing anew. It says spiritual, of the resurrection, to be resurrected or brought back. And we believe through faith that King David is going to be brought back, right? Now, let's get what the words of the Most High Yahuwah Bashem Yahushua says. Let's start in the book of Jeremiah, the 30th chapter, in verse 8. Jeremiah 30 and 8, and it reads, "For it shall come to pass in that day," speaking of the last days, "saith the Lord Yahuwah of hosts, that I will break his yoke from off his neck," meaning Israel is going to be freed from his captivity. "And I will burst thy bonds, and strangers, which are the other nations, shall no more serve themselves of him." When you go back to Psalm, the 82nd chapter, right? We were given over to the nations. The 17th chapter of Jeremiah, the 4th verse, we were discontinued, from our heritage that the Lord Yahuwah had given us. So this is speaking of Israel, being given the kingdom of heaven. Now, as we continue on, Jeremiah 39, it says, "But they," speaking of the children of Israel, "shall serve the Lord Yahuwah, their power." And we're coming back to doing that now. We're going to do that perfectly in the kingdom. "And David, their king," I'll read it again, Jeremiah 30 and 9, "But they shall serve the Lord Yahuwah, their power, and David, their king, whom I will raise up unto them." So David, the king of Israel, is going to be raised up in these last days, point blank period, right? So King David is going to be resurrected. He's going to be brought back. Now, as it's time pertaining to being here on the earth, we'll get into some parallels going into King David, reincarnated. I'm going to go continuing on with the fact that scriptures say that, that we're going to serve David, our king, right? So upon the establishment of the kingdom of heaven, you're going to have Yahushua, who's the Lord of Lords, Kings of Kings, underneath Yahuwah. So you're going to have Yahushua, and then you have King David after Yahushua, who will be second in command, who is going to be our king, which is a promise of the Lord. We'll get into that here in a minute. Let's get more of that. This is the book of Ezekiel 37 and verse 23. Matter of fact, I'll start at verse 24. Ezekiel 37 and 24, it says, "And David, my servant, shall be king over them," speaking of the children of Israel. And this is being spoken of future prophecy in the book of Ezekiel, right? Which is the same chapter when you read it from the top, going into the fact of that the children of Israel would come back to life. The valley of the dry bones, same chapter. So this is the end of that chapter. This is Ezekiel 37 and 24. It says, "And David, my servant, shall be king over them, and they all shall have one shepherd," which is going to be Yahushua. "They shall also walk in my judgments and observe my statutes and do them." Verse 25. "In the kingdom, we're going to do them perfectly," which is a part of that second covenant. Ezekiel 37 and 25. "And they shall dwell in the land that I have given unto Jacob my servant, wherein your fathers have dwelt, and they shall dwell therein, even they and their children and their children's children forever." And that is the kingdom of heaven. And that lines up with Isaiah, the 14th chapter, right? The first 3 verses. It says, "In their children's children's forever. And my servant David shall be their prince forever." So King David is going to be our king. He's going to be our ruler. It said forever. Underneath Yahushua, that is. Ezekiel 37 and 26. "Moreover, I will make a covenant of peace with them. It shall be an everlasting covenant," meaning it's on never end, which is immortality. Those new bodies, dominion, rulership over the nations, right? The righteous order, the law, statutes, and commandments being the governing, being the government and being a governing law over all people and on the earth forever. So it says, "Moreover, I will make a covenant of peace with them. It shall be an everlasting covenant with them. And I will place them and multiply them, and will set my sanctuary in the midst of them forever." Right? So this is going to be forever. Verse 27, my tabernacle also shall be with them. Yea, I will be their power, and they shall be my people. So that's speaking of and referring to the establishment of the kingdom of heaven. Now, as we get into King David, reincarnated, let me get that fresco again. This is a fresco here. Salakia, going into, and at the top, it goes into the true depiction of Israel, going into the true depiction of Israelites, right? There's an archive, it's an old fresco that was of King David going back to like, I want to say the 1400s or something. Now, as it pertains, to King David and who he was, it says we will return unto David and he will be our king. So King David, as we get into his life more now, we'll shift a little bit, between now and the return of Yahuwah. King David, is going to be resurrected. He's going to be raised up. So let's get another precept just going into that and getting into King David's life and the parallels. This is the book of Matthew, the 19th chapter, starting at verse 27. And it reads, then answered Peter, which is a parallel we're going to see between Peter and King David, which they are the same person, reincarnated, which is what we're getting into now, right? Matthew 19 and 27. Then answered Peter and said unto him, behold, we have forsaken all and followed thee. What shall we have therefore? So this was a question being asked by Peter, who is King David, who was King David in the reincarnation, which we'll get that here in a second, Lord will. Matthew 19 and 28, and Yahuwah said unto them, verily I say unto you, that ye which have followed me in the regeneration, we got the word regenerate, what it means to be regenerated and reincarnated, means to come back in the flesh, to come back in the genes, in your times. So it says, ye which have followed me, Yahuwah said, in the regeneration, when the Son of Man shall sit in the throne of his glory, ye also shall sit upon 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So now, that was a question being asked by Peter, which Peter figures prominently, when you go into the scriptures, as one that the Lord said he would establish his church with. He would be the rock upon which, the Most High would establish his church, right? And that was told to him, by Yahuwah. So now, as we get into it, we see that the Most High, through Yahuwah here in Matthew 19 and 28, said that those that follow him were going to sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes. And as you go through the scriptures, those promises were made, to the believers, right? Was made to the believers that they would be the rulers and judges to establish everything, right, on the earth, which they're known as the first fruits. The first fruit, the kingdom of heaven, the elect, the Bakaria in the Hebrew. So now let's just get into that, as we continue to go through reincarnated. Now here goes some parallels, going into King David, right? And we also going to touch on Moses because, when you read in the scriptures, the promises that were made were started with Abraham, but they were established through Moses, which was in the giving of the law, which was the covenant. So everything was established, when the covenant was established, which was through Moses, who was also King David, when you go back into the scriptures, and let's show that. So this is the book of Deuteronomy. Let's show some parallels, proving that. Deuteronomy, the 34th chapter. And I'm going to start, matter of fact, I'll go right to the point. Deuteronomy 34 and verse 4. It says, and the Lord Yahuwah said unto him, speaking of Moses, when you read from the top of the chapter, and the Most High said unto him, this is the land which I swear unto Abraham, unto Isaac, and unto Jacob, saying, I will give it unto thy seed. I have caused thee to see it with thine eyes, but thou shalt not go over thither. Verse 5, showing you that it's speaking of Moses, who was King David in the past. Deuteronomy 34 and 5. So Moses, the servant of the Lord Yahuwah, died in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord Yahuwah Ba'ashem Yahushua. So this is the time when Moses died. So the Lord told Moses he would not be able to see the promised land. So this was being spoken of Moses. So here goes some of the parallels. Now, one of the parallels is that once again, we're going to connect through the Spirit, Lord willing. We're going to connect that Moses and King David was the same person, as well as Peter, because they were reincarnated. They were back in the flesh again in their times. These promises that were made going back, and established through Moses on down, which that line, going back through Moses, it was also continued on through Jacob, which this was just the same person, same promises, the same parallels in the spirit for those that can receive it. And then from Jacob, King David, and then from King David, down to Peter, which they are all the same person. So let's touch on a few of these parallels. So we got the fact that Moses was told that he wouldn't be able to see the promised land, right? And from there, Joshua took over. So let's get another parallel going into the fact that when Moses was not able, to see the promised land, here's a parallel, and there was a significance to that. So this is the book of First Chronicles, the 22nd chapter. First Chronicles 22, starting at verse 5, and it reads, "And David said, Solomon my son is younger and tender, and the house that is to be builded for the Lord Yahuwah must be exceeding magnifical." It says, "of fame and of glory throughout all countries. I will therefore now make preparation for it." So David prepared abundantly before his death. So David wanted to, erect a temple, right? He wanted to build up a temple for the Most High. But let's see the parallel going back to Moses, how he was not able to see the promised land, and to David, how and what happened when he wanted to build that temple for the Most High, Yahuwah. First Chronicles 22:6. "Then he called for Solomon, his son, and charged him to build an house for the Lord Yahuwah, power of Israel. And David said to Solomon, my son, as for me, it was in my mind to build an house unto the name of the Lord Yahuwah, my power. But the word of the Lord Yahuwah came to me, saying, Thou hast shed blood abundantly, and hast made great wars. Thou shalt not build an house unto my name, because thou hast shed much blood upon the earth in my sight." So now David was not able, to build the temple for the Lord. But that duty was passed on to Solomon, who was the son of the Most High. For those that know, understand, and believe, that was passed on to Solomon, who was also Yahuwah in the reincarnation, before the Lord came back in his perfection, right? He was Solomon as well. So a lot of parallels are going on here. So David was not able, to build a temple for the Most High. That was done through Solomon, because the scriptures say he had much bloodshed, which is a parallel between he and Moses. Moses was not able, to reach the promised land. And this was not by accident. This was all through the spirit of Yahuwah Ba'ashem Yahushua. So now, as we continue on, we see a lot of the parallels, and we'll get into the scriptures showing we see that tie between Moses and King David, and there's others. And as we get into it, we'll jump into the fact, that Peter also, who was spoken of earlier, that Peter was King David as well. And let's get into that, and show that through the Spirit. This is the book of Matthew. This is Matthew, the 16th chapter, going into Peter, who was King David, and reincarnated. This is showing reincarnation is biblical. Matthew 16, and I'm going to start at verse 13. Matthew 16 and verse 13, and it reads, as it pertains to Peter, when Yahuwah came into the coast of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, Whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? Verse 14, and they said, Some say that thou art John the Baptist, some Elias, and others Jeremias, or one of the prophets. Which chose you that the prophets always understood reincarnation, right? Because the Lord asked, who do people say that I am? And the response was given that they said that you could be any one of the other prophets coming back, right? Being reincarnated back in the flesh. Verse 15, he saith unto them, but whom say ye that I am? Verse 16, Matthew 16 and 16, and it reads, and Simon Peter answered and said, thou art the Hamashiach, or the Messiah, the Son of the living power. Verse 17, and Yahuwah answered and said unto him, blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood have not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. That was through the Holy Spirit that he understood that, right? Now, continuing on, in the point, Matthew 16 and 18, and I say also unto thee, that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. So it was told to Peter, that he would be this rock upon which the church will be built, which that rock, goes into the fact that he would be rooted, he would be established, everything would be established through Peter, which was King David, right? So upon that rock, and a rock is a solid foundation, right? So Peter would be that solid foundation that, that this ministry would continue on through after Yahuwah was crucified and resurrected. And that was established continuing on with Peter. So Peter, it was said that he would be that rock. Yahuwah said he would be that rock. Now, why is that important? Because when we go through these parallels, we see that what was said and the understanding that this was explained through the precepts and the understanding even before this was even told to Peter, right? So let's get that. Let's show that through the spirit, of Yahweh Shem Yahushua. This is the book of Psalm going into Peter. Peter was King David, for those that can receive it, for those that have eyes to see and ears to hear, for those that are in receipt of the Rakakwadash. This is the book of Psalm 27, going into Peter being King David. Look what was said when you read from the top of the chapter. And I'm going to start at Psalm 27 and 1. It says, the Psalm of David. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord Yahuwah is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? So it's King David speaking in Psalm the 27th chapter, which is, it says a Psalm of David. So now let's go to the point. Psalm 27, right? And we started there. We'll just continue on reading. Let's go to verse 2. Psalm 27 and 2. It says, when the wicked, even mine enemies, and my foes come upon me to eat up my flesh, they stumble and fail. Though an host should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war, Salakia, should rise against me, in this will I be confident. One thing have I desired of the Lord Yahuwah, that I will seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord Yahuwah all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord Yahuwah, and to inquire in his temple. Verse 5, and here's the point. The parallel between David, King David, and Peter, showing you that, Peter was King David reincarnated. And this was spoken of before Peter, before David was reincarnated as Peter in a later time. Psalm 27 and 5, for in the time, it says, Psalm 27 and 5, for in the time of trouble, he shall hide me in his pavilion. In the secret of his tabernacle shall he hide me. He shall set me up upon a rock. He shall set me up upon a rock. Let's go back to what was said to Peter. Matthew 16 and verse 18. And it reads, and I say also unto thee, that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. So all through the Spirit, for those that can receive it, can see that even before Peter was around, he was spoken of and being spoken of as being established upon a rock, right? So I read Psalm 27 and 5 again, the latter half. It says, I'll just start from the top. Psalm 27:5, for in the time of trouble he shall hide me in his pavilion, because it was told to Peter that the gates of hell would not prevail against him. Now this actually was happening to King David, and it happened all over again, right? And we'll get into that. So it says, he shall hide me in his pavilion, in the secret of his tabernacle shall he hide me. He shall set me up upon a rock. And so that rock that he was set up upon, as time went on later, was Peter. He was Peter, right? He was that rock. He was that rock of salvation. So now, as we continue on reading, which that also applies to Yahuwah as well when you read with understanding, but this is showing the parallel between the two, that Peter and King David, when it was spoken of that he would be that rock, that was said even before that was even established through Peter, right? It was said of referring to King David because they were the same person in the reincarnation. So now let's get a little bit more on that. Going into King David, we're gonna go back also dealing with Moses. King David, Peter, and Jacob also falls, in that same line as that same person reincarnated through the Spirit. So now let's get a little bit more. So now let's go to the book of Luke, the 22nd chapter. So this is the book of Luke 22. And I'll start at verse 31. Luke 22 and verse 31, and it reads, and the Lord said, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan hath desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat. I'll read it again. Luke 22 and verse 31. And it reads, and these are the words of Yahuwah, and the Lord said, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan hath desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat. Right? So this was told, to Peter, that Satan wanted to sift him. Yahuwah was allowing Peter to know and understand is he was going to be the establishment, of the kingdom after he died. He was the head disciple. Simon, Peter was the head disciple of all the disciples. So he was being warned that Satan wanted to sift him, right? So now let's show another parallel. The Lord said Satan wants to sift you as wheat, right? So now let's show another parallel, going into that. Now, here's a parallel, and this parallel goes into the fact that this was spoken of through the Spirit concerning King David, or Salakias, concerning Moses, right? Concerning Moses. So that parallel now we're showing is between Peter and going into Peter and Moses. And then we'll tie it back in with David as well, because they're all the same people reincarnated. The book of Jude 1 in verse 9, it says, yet Michael the archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses. It says, durst not bring any against him a railing accusation, but said, the Lord rebuked thee. Now, let's read it again. Jude 1 and 9, it says, yet Michael the archangel, which is the archangel war, when contending with the devil, he disputed. So when the Lord said that Satan wants to sift you, now we're seeing another parallel, a dispute. And this is dealing with the archangel Michael, right? And the body of Moses. It says, yet Michael, the archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses. And why was he, disputing about the body of Moses? When we go back to Luke 22 and 31, it says, and the Lord said, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan hath desired to have you, that he may sift you as wheat, right? So there's a parallel there for those that can, that can receive that, right? Between Peter and going back to Moses. Now let's tie also through the Spirit, King David in there further. So that's Peter going back to Moses. So this desiring of his body. Let's go back to the book of Deuteronomy 34. And we was reading, here before. And let's hit the point. This is Deuteronomy 34. And I'll go to the point because it talks about how Moses died, right? We read before. So now, after Moses died, it was a dispute about the body, about his body, right? When we read back in Jude, right? So now, let's go further. Before we do that, let's just go right back to Jude real quick and get that one more time. Jude 1 and 9. Yet Michael, the archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses, right? So now, let's go forward to the book of Deuteronomy 34 again and get to the point. Now, what we read earlier, that the promised land, which was promised, Moses wasn't able to see, which King David wasn't able to erect or build a temple, right? We're showing those parallels. Now let's get back to the fact in this same chapter, going to verse 6. Now this is concerning Peter, who the Lord, Yahuwah told him that Satan wanted to sift him. And then Moses, which they are the same person coming back, reincarnated. It was said that he wanted to, he desired his body, right? That the body of Moses was desired by the devil. Now, continuing on, this is the book of Deuteronomy 34. And I'll start back at verse 5. It says, so Moses, the servant of the Lord Yahuwah, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord Yahuwah. Verse 6, and the point. And he buried him in a valley in the land of Moab, over against Beth Peor. But no man knoweth of his sepulchre unto this day. That means his grave. No man knoweth what his grave is, because his body was being, disputed about, right? When you go back to Jude, disputed about the body of Moses. So now when you go back to Deuteronomy 34:6, where Moses was buried, right? No man knew where he was buried unto this day. So that was through the Spirit of the Lord, because his body was being disputed. Like, it was the fact that, he was going to be, when you go back to Peter being sifted, that was also the Lord preserving him so that, his body, his remains wouldn't be messed with, because we're in a time now where you got this devil Esau, who's using the bones and going back and, trying to resurrect people on the left-hand side, right? Trying to resurrect people on the left-hand side, which is cloning people, etc. So they're doing that by using, bones and, so on and so forth of animals and, even people. They're even trying to do that with people. So that shows you that the bones are being preserved of King David, and that no man knew of his sepulchre to this day, which he was Moses, for those that could receive it. So I just want to tie a few of the parallels up, showing, some of the things that, prove that these, this great man here that we see, King David, Malak Dawadah, that he came back and that he was different people at different times. And he came back in his greatness. Once again, even as Jacob, which when he was here as Jacob, he also gave birth, to the 12 tribes of Israel, right? That was through Jacob that the 12 tribes came forth, which through the Spirit will get showing that was continuing on that promise of the Lord, that his seed, would receive all those blessings in the end, and that will be forevermore. But now, let's get another one. Let's go to the book of Psalm, the 89th chapter, Psalm 89. And I'm going to start first at verse 3. Now, this chapter is getting into King David, Psalm 89 and 3, pretty much from the top to the bottom. And let's hear what's said about King David. Psalm 89 and 3, it says, I have made a covenant with my chosen. I have sworn unto David, my servant. So the Lord, Yahuwah said he made a covenant with his chosen, which he have sworn unto David, which was his servant. I read it in NLT. Psalm 89:3. The Lord Yahuwah said, I have made a covenant with David, my chosen servant. I have sworn this oath to him. So what was this oath that the Lord had sworn to him? Verse 4. Thy seed will I establish forever. Right? So his seed, his line, his lineage through David, he says he would establish forever and build up thy throne to all generations. Right? So that was a promise the Lord made. Now I'll read it in the NLT, Psalm 89:4. I will establish your descendants as kings forever. Right? The king, which we will be, priests and kings. We'd be a kingdom of priests, which is the children of Israel. We will be gods on the earth, the scriptures say. I will establish your descendants as kings forever. They will sit on your throne from now until eternity. So now, that was a promise that was made. So we're in Psalm 89. Now let's continue on in Psalm 89 to see some of the promises that were made through King David, because that covenant was spoken of going back to Abraham, but it was established through Moses, who was King David, with that covenant, which was mingled with blood, sprinkled with blood, and that went back to King David, and we'll get that showing that was King David at that time. As a matter of fact, before we continue on in Psalm 89, showing you that covenant that was established, that was originally established through King David, going back, that King David, was Moses. He was Moses. And let's show that. This is that King David was Moses. Here goes another precept, another parallel, going into that. Right? Let's see if I can find it. This is the book of Deuteronomy. I believe it's back in 34. This is now Deuteronomy 33. Deuteronomy 33. And I'll get right to the point in verse 4. Deuteronomy 33:4 says, Moses commanded us a law, even the inheritance of the congregation of Jacob. Verse 5, and he was king in Jeshurun. When you look up Jeshurun, it goes into Israel, being the ideal character of Israel in this ideal state. So he was, which in the Hebrew is Yashawan. It says, and he was king in Jeshurun, or Yashawan in the Hebrew, when the heads of the people and the tribes of Israel were gathered together. So he was the king. It goes into, the 12 tribes. Now, he was the king, right? Moses was given that law. It says, and he was king. So he was the first king, right? He was the first king, and he came back, and that was reestablished during the time of King David, when the kingdom was given him, from Saul. So if you went to Google and you looked up the first king of Israel, it will tell you it will be Saul, but truly, it was Moses, who was King David. So he came back, if you could receive it, at the time of King Saul, and that was reestablished through King David, once again, right? So he was the king. He was the first king of Israel, the first king in Jeshurun, Yashawan, the first king of Israel, right? So that's just another parallel showing you through the Spirit, for those that can receive it, that Moses was King David and Peter, which we're going through the precepts, all through the Spirit. Once again, it was told, to Peter, flesh and blood, Yahuwah said, have not, shown you these things, roughly paraphrasing. But my Father, which is in heaven, this is all through the Holy Spirit, through the Rekakwadash, that we can even understand or see these parallels. It's all through the Spirit of the Lord, for those that can receive it. So now, let's go back to Psalm 89. I was making a point. We read, in Psalm 89, in verses 4 and 5, that the Lord made a covenant with David. He said, and he swore this to him, that his seed would be, the descendants and have rulership forever on the earth, right? That's the house of David. So let's stay in that same chapter. We was in verse 4 and 5. Let's continue on. Let's go down Let me hit the point too, because all this is good. When you read from like 21, it all proves, it gives a lot more understanding going back to King David, right? Now, let me pick up at verse, let's pick up verse 27, Psalm 89 and 27. It says, also I will make him my firstborn. This is referring to David now, higher than the kings of the earth. We're going to see that here in a second, because upon reading this, one could think it's speaking about Yahuwah, but in context, it's not. It's speaking about King David, right? Matter of fact, let me start at 26 to put it even more in context. Psalm 89 and 26, he shall cry unto me, thou art my father, my power, and the rock of my salvation. Verse 27, also I will make him my firstborn, higher than the kings of the earth. My mercy will I keep for him forevermore, and my covenant shall stand fast with him. And that covenant was with who? Established with Moses. But this is referring to King David when we read, right? So we see the parallels. This was spoken of when we went back to Deuteronomy, the 34th chapter and the 33rd chapter, and going back to the time, of Moses. It was established, that covenant was made with Moses, right? I read it again, Psalm 89 and 28. My mercy will I keep for him forevermore, and my covenant shall stand fast with him. Continuing on, this is speaking of King David when we keep reading, which went back to Moses. Verse 29, his seed also will I make to endure forever, and his throne as the days of heaven. It says his seed, it says he will also make to endure forever, and his throne as the days of heaven. Verse 30, if his children forsake my law and walk not in my judgments, if they break my statutes and keep not my commandments, then will I visit their transgression with the rod and their iniquity with the stripes, right? Or with stripes. Let's continue going on down. Verse 33, nevertheless, my loving kindness will I not utterly take from him, speaking of David, nor suffer my faithfulness to fail. So the Lord said he would be faithful unto David. These are the sure mercies of David. Verse 34, my covenant will I not break nor alter, the thing that is gone out of my lips, that covenant the Lord made from the beginning, starting and establishing that with King David. Verse 35, once have I sworn by my holiness that I will not lie unto David. So the Lord said that he would not lie to David, And why did he say that? Verse 36, his seed shall endure forever, and his throne as the sun before me. So it says his seed will endure forever, and his throne as the sun. That ordinance that was put up will be forever. So he said his seed, once again, was going to endure forever. And that's, being established now through who? That's going to be the first fruits, which is, the elect. But King David is going to be rose up in these last days. Thus saith the scriptures. So now I want to get a little bit more. The Lord said he would not lie to David and to his seed, that promise he made. That promise was made when you go back through Moses, which shows you that it's speaking of Moses, right? The Lord said he would not lie unto David because that covenant was made with Moses. So he was not going to lie about what he promised to Moses. And then what was said to Peter was that he would be that rock, because it was the same person reincarnated back in the flesh again. And that same promise was made each time, not to three different people. It was made to the same person, right? It was just being established once again, through the coming of King David, Peter, Moses, and Jacob, right? So let's see if I can get a few more scripts. Now this is going into that promise that was made to the seed of David forever. And there's a lot of precepts. I just want to get a few going into that. How powerful that is. This is the book of Ecclesiasticus, also known as Sirach 47 and 22. It says, but the Lord will never leave off his mercy, neither shall any of his works perish, neither will he abolish the posterity of his elect, right, which is the offspring. And the seed of him that loveth him, he will not take away. Wherefore he gave a remnant unto Jacob, and out of him a root unto David. So that remnant unto Jacob and that root unto David was at establishment, because these were the same people at different times. So those promises that were made, that remnant and that of the root of David, right? He was never going to leave off mercy. He was never going to forget. He was never going to lie. We just read it a second ago, And I'll read it again. Psalm 89 and 35. Once have I sworn by my holiness that I will not lie unto David. His seed shall endure forever, and his throne as the sun before me. So he said he wasn't going to lie to David, because that was the same promise that was made when you go back to Moses, when that covenant was established through Moses, right? And continued on through Jacob, on down to David, and on down to Peter. So King David is going to be rose up in these last days. And once again, this is the sure mercies of David. Let's get that a little bit more before we close it out. This is the book of Psalm 18 and verse 50. Psalm 18 and 50. And it reads, great deliverance giveth he to his king, and showeth mercy to his anointed, which is the elect, and showeth mercy to his anointed, to David, and to his seed forevermore. Let's read it again. Great deliverance giveth he to his king, and showeth mercy to his anointed, to David, and to his seed forevermore. So those are the sure mercies of David. The scriptures say forevermore, right? So that mercy is promised through David on down to the believers, which is the house of David, starting with 144,000, and the elect. So with that, I hope that was edifying. I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahuwah, by Hashem Yahushai, by Hashem Rakakwadash. Double honor to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, who are the true teachers of Israel today. Peace, love, blessings, and salutations to the believers, the Akim and Akwathium, who listen and believe on Yahuwah by Hashem Yahushai, and unto you believers, unto you brothers is labor to make the call of election sure, as we push this truth, to the coming of our Lord Hamashiach Yahushai, which is at hand, to the believers, unto you I say shalom.